if I wasn't folding it, I would now add a seam allowance. You can't see. I know. I'm going to do. I'm going to get a lot of these demonstrations filmed and put on Brio. So we did one the other day actually. Oh dear. I'm not sure. I had all the students around. I think it's better if I perhaps do them privately and then someone just films me. And it went on for an hour and a half. About an hour and a half. I was doing a big demonstration. Now I've done that, so I've got my finished measurement. I've marked the side seams, I've marked the centre front. I've got the double width I want, so I'm going to fold it over. Now, there's one more thing we've got to think about. What's going to happen here?
We have to give more 3 centimeters in on the back.
Hooks. What? Hooks, yes. Button. I could.
You could make a zip.
We could make that absolutely flush and take the zip all the way up into the waistband. Sure. We could. That's what I want to do. So you see all these different things that we're talking about. We've only talked about 5 probably here, but there's so many other different ways you could do it. And I'm hoping that as we explore different ways of making things, it will broaden your designing as well. That's the idea. It's all part of the package. It's not separate. This is all part of it. So, or we could make a little tab. The reason why we do a tab is if it was like that, and I had my zip there, and then I wanted a button here, well, I've got nowhere to put my button, have I? So I've got to make a tab. I've got to make a tab so that my button is a bit like on the back of the little top you've done. You have to do a button extension. In a way, this is a button extension. So you put the button here. The top one will sit flush, yeah, and that'll have a buttonhole. Or the top one could be long, and you could make a feature of it. You could put a button here and a button here. Or you can make it even longer and point it. Millions of things you can do. Yeah? I'm just showing you the principles so you can apply them. So I'm going to put a tab on. Now we only put a tab on normally one end. So choose your end. It doesn't really matter at this stage. And depending on the size of your button will depend how deep your tab is. I'm going to do 2.5. So that's my tab. Just on one end, yeah? Now I'm going to put a seam allowance all the way around using these lines. Yeah? I'll be finished soon and I'm going to send you off to do this. Put this up again. You're using long lines. You've come to join in. Don't waste time measuring it. Measure one end, measure the other. Metre rule. Done. Yes? I've done my waistband. How many of these do I need to cut? 1. Thank you. Where's the grain going?
Sorry, we don't have to cut. We don't have to cut 3 because of the thing to put inside to be more stronger. We don't have to cut 3.
Good idea. Talk about that in a minute. Let's stick to the grain. That's excellent. That's about interlining. I'll talk about that in a minute. It can go either way, to be honest. In production, it'll go this way because they will lay it. If this is my fabric, it's the width of my fabric, and it's going on for miles and miles and miles. They can lay this down the side. They can sneak it in. If you turn it this way, it's not so economical, therefore not so cheap. And also, that grain along your fabric is the stronger one. Now, of course, you can play with this. If you've got a stripy fabric or a check fabric and you want to play with the print, then of course you can mess around with where you put the grain. I am going to put it a long ways. this way. So it goes down the fold. I just mark it with arrows either side, and that's my grain. Okay, and it's a size 12. So I'm going to put that on as well. Size 12, I'm going to put 71. Ooh. 71 centimetres. Just so I know, put information on, yeah? You're giving yourself information. So when I pick this up in a year's time, I know what I've done. Okay, when you cut out your patterns, so I'm working full scale now. We've been working half scale up to now. Cut out so you're comfortable, keep it flat on the table. It's all practice, practice, practice. This isn't very straight. Okay, you can do it straight on that. Oh, but I've got the glasses on. Thank you, my assistant. There we go. One waistband. And what I then do is this to make sure it's the same.
It looks huge.
Sometimes it's not. But, well, it'll end up this, won't it? It'll end up this, won't it, Sophia? It'll end up that minus the seam allowance.
It's still huge.
It is. It's a wide one. It's a wide one. That's 4. Yeah.
4, 3.
And this was 5. So on here, now we need to notch. Now we need to notch. Again, do you see I'm working flat all the time? Work flat on the table, so I'm not picking up my notches and going like this. It's not. I can't keep my paper still if I hold it up. Now, so I've notched along there, so that's going to guide me as I sew. I'm going to know that goes on the centre back opening. I know that's going to fall where my side seam is. This is going to fall at the centre front. Now, I might not have a seam at the centre front, but I still want a notch at the centre front. So therefore, I would notch my skirt pattern. Because if I don't notch the centre front, what can happen is that's when your twisting starts, when we were talking about twisting. Because if you're not too familiar with handing fabric under the sewing machine, you don't know, you could be pushing, pulling that fabric. Now the notches are there to help guide you. So I know that if I put that centre front notch on my skirt centre front notch, because a notch usually has a friend, if you find it floating around on its own, you've missed something off. I know I've centralised it, and I haven't pulled it. Because what happens is you sew your waistband on, and then you end up with your waistband being this much bigger than your skirt, and you think, just cut it off. But then what happens if you cut it off? It's not going to fit, is it? Something isn't right. That's called cheating as well. And the reason why I've right angled here is because I'm going to also notch, the opposite one. And it's that prevents your twisting. Because when you fold it over, when you sew it on, those notches should fall on top of each other. And if they don't, you're twisting your waistband, or your cuff, or your jacket band, or whatever band you're putting on. It's the same principle. Now, I've talked a lot. Does anybody want to say anything? Ask anything? Confused about anything? Yeah.
I'm not confused.
Okay.
I missed 2 sessions, and doing that. Is there like a catch up?
The only way really you can catch up is by speaking very nicely with one of your colleagues and asking them to show you what they've done. I'm so busy, I really don't have time to repeat I've got second photos as well, you see.